The desert was breathing its last light when he found him, sprawled in the sand like a broken prayer, blood turning black beneath the dying sun. The wind sang through the canyons, carrying whispers that didn't belong to the living. He thought it was another corpse left by the border wars, until the man twitched. The mask gleamed under the grit, iron and bone welded by time and pain. Something in the stillness told him not to look, not to lift it. But he did. And when he did, the world he'd buried came crawling back. The face beneath was one he'd seen once in a dream, then in memory, then in nightmares. The face he'd sworn he'd lost forever. He didn't breathe, didn't move, couldn't. The desert fell silent, holding its breath with him. Because what kind of man finds his brother dying in the dust and doesn't know if he should save him or finish what time it started? He dragged the wounded man through the whispering dunes until the canyon swallowed them both. The air grew colder as the light dimmed, the desert's heat giving way to silence thick enough to choke. He found a crumbling adobe hut, half sunk into sand, a ghost of shelter for two lost souls. He didn't speak, just laid the body down and lit a match, watching the flame struggle like memory refusing to die. The mask lay beside him, empty now, its hollow eyes staring at the ceiling like judgment. Night fell fast. Coyotes sang to the moon, and the desert answered. He stitched what he could with shaking hands, each pull of thread like a prayer, half remembered. The man beneath the bandages groaned, a sound that cut through years of silence. He wanted to believe it wasn't real, that ghosts didn't bleed. But when he touched the man's pulse, he felt it. Slow, stubborn, alive, the kind of heartbeat that refuses to die, even when the world begs it to. He sat beside him till dawn, staring at the horizon like it might forgive him. The stars faded one by one, leaving only the cold blue of morning. Every scar, every wrinkle, every cut on his own hands spoke of things left undone. He whispered a name he hadn't dared speak in years, and for a moment he thought he heard the wind whisper it back. By sunrise he'd decided to stay, at least until the man woke or died. But somewhere out beyond the dunes, thunder rolled, not from clouds but from hooves. Dust rose on the far ridge, shaped like judgment coming home. The past was riding for him again, and this time it knew his name. The first sound that morning wasn't the wind. It was a groan. Low, hoarse, alive. He turned quick, heart jumping like a startled horse. The man on the cot stirred, reaching toward a world that wasn't there. His breath hitched, caught between dream and pain. He muttered words that time had half forgotten, names swallowed by dust. The drifter leaned closer, unsure if mercy or madness had brought him here. Outside, the desert burned white, a furnace without forgiveness. He poured a sip of water, steady hands masking the quake inside. When their eyes met, one clear, one clouded with fever, the silence spoke louder than any gun ever could. He remembered that voice, deep, rough, familiar as the ache in his chest. It clawed through years of silence, dragging the past up by the roots. The wounded man tried to speak, but blood stole his words. The drifter shushed him, pressing water to his lips. "Don't talk," he muttered, but what he really meant was don't remember. Yet memory was a stubborn thing. It never dies easy. It hides in the cracks, waiting for a breath to bring it roaring back. Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the canyon like the ghosts of all they'd left behind. By midday, the fever broke into shivers. Eli wrapped him in his coat, listening to the rasp of each breath. Outside, thunder rolled nearer, not skyborne, but rising from the earth. Hoofbeats, riders. He knew that rhythm. The world had a way of sending old sins back wearing new boots. He looked down at his brother's face, still and ghostly, and realized that saving him might kill them both. The sound grew louder, the air heavier, as if even the desert knew what was coming. The knock came slow, 3 times, hollow against wood. Eli's hand froze halfway to his gun. A woman's voice followed, dry as sand and twice as sharp. "You always did pick bad places to hide." He knew that tone. It carried whiskey and warnings. When he opened the door, the light cut through her like a halo of trouble. She looked him over with a half-smile that wasn't kind. "You don't look surprised," she said. "Should I be?" he answered. The silence that followed told him she knew exactly who was bleeding on his floor. "Carmen," Mara stepped in like she owned the place, boots crunching over sand that had blown in through the cracks. She took one look at the men on the cot and her smile died. "You've got no idea what kind of hornet's nest you kicked open," she said. Eli said nothing, just stared at the mask lying by the wall. "They're coming for him," she continued, voice low, "and when they find out who he really is, they'll burn this desert clean." The wind howled through the doorway then, carrying a taste of storm and blood. Eli turned away, eyes hard. "Then we'd better start digging graves." The fever broke at dawn, but what woke in its place was colder than death. The wounded man's eyes opened slow, like shutters letting in a storm. Eli froze mid-motion, rag in hand, watching as memory crawled back into those eyes. Silence stretched thin, snapping when a single word rasped out. His name. It wasn't said like a greeting. It was a wound reopened. Eli swallowed hard, the years between them vanishing in a heartbeat. The air thickened, heavy with things unsaid. Two brothers, one ghost between them. Outside, thunder rolled low, promising rain or ruin. Inside, something older than both of them started to breathe again. "You should have left me there," the younger man said. His voice cracked, not from pain but fury swallowed too long. Eli didn't answer. There weren't words left that could mend that kind of break. The silence pressed between them until it felt like a third person in the room. Caleb's gaze drifted to the mask lying nearby. "You don't know what I've done," he said. "You don't know who's coming." Eli met his eyes at last. "Maybe I don't," he said softly, "but I know who you were." The wind outside rose again, carrying the sound of distant hoofbeats. The desert never let anyone stay buried for long. Mara watched from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You boys done burying ghosts?" she asked, voice low but steady. Neither answered. Caleb's breathing grew ragged, his hand inching toward the edge of the cot where his knife once was. Eli caught the motion and shook his head. "Don't," he said. The word hit harder than a bullet. Mara stepped inside, breaking the standoff with the scrape of her boots. "You're out of time," she said. "Boone's men are 2 ridges out, and they out bringing mercy." Eli turned toward her, face hardening. "Then we ride before they ride us." Caleb's eyes darkened, the kind that remember too much blood. They left the hut behind as the first drops of rain began to fall. The desert changed its face under the storm, and for a moment so did they. 2 rioters cutting through mud and thunder, brothers again, if only by necessity. The mask hung from Eli's saddle, swinging like an omen in the wind. Lightning clawed across the sky, revealing canyon walls scarred and ancient. Caleb rode ahead, silent, the rain washing dust and blood alike from his skin. Eli watched him, wondering if he was chasing redemption or running from it. Either way, the road was the same. By nightfall, they reached the old outpost, a ghost of a place left to die in the rocks. The roof sagged, windows hollow. They took shelter inside, listening to the rain pound against the boards. Caleb finally spoke. "You ever wonder why Boone never came looking for me?" Eli's eyes narrowed. "You saying he knew?" Caleb smiled, slow and bitter. "He didn't just know. He sold me." The fire popped between them, spitting sparks into the dark. Eli looked away, jaw tightening. Somewhere in the night, a wolf howled. The sound felt too close to home. They rode at dawn, shadows chasing the light. The rain had stopped, leaving the desert smelling of rust and regret. Eli's horse kicked through puddles that reflected a sky split between gold and gray. Caleb rode ahead, the wind cutting through his wet hair. his jaw clenched like stone. No words passed between them. They didn't need them. Every hoofbeat said what they wouldn't. That the road ahead wasn't about forgiveness. It was about ending something that should have died years ago. Behind them, smoke rose from the hut they'd left burning. The past was ash now. All that mattered was the canyon ahead, and the men waiting in it. The canyon opened like a wound, raw, red, and waiting. The brothers dismounted, moving between jagged walls, painted by centuries of dust and blood. "I'll come from the ridge," Caleb murmured, his voice hard but steady. Eli nodded, checking his rifle with hands that didn't shake anymore. Somewhere above, a hawk cried, and the echo fell like a warning. The silence before the fight was almost holy. The kind of stillness that makes a man realize he's already half gone. When the first shot cracked, the world snapped back into motion, and the desert remembered how to roar. Gunfire turned the canyon into thunder. The brothers moved like ghosts of war, each shot echoing with memory. Caleb's aim was precise, ruthless, a decade of rage guiding every pull of the trigger. Eli covered his flank, the rhythm of survival returning like an old song. They fought not for glory, but for the silence that follows. When the last rider fell, the wind carried smoke and the faint smell of gunpowder and blood. Caleb leaned against the rock, breathing heavy. Eli stood over the bodies, eyes empty. "You always did pick bad company," he muttered. Caleb gave a hollow smile. "You taught me how." The smoke cleared slow. The silence afterward was almost cruel. Eli looked over at his brother, eyes sharp, face streaked with dust and blood. For the first time in years, they looked like kin again, standing shoulder to shoulder against a world that had tried to break them. "Boone's still out there," Caleb said quietly. "He'll be waiting." Eli nodded. "Then let's not keep him waiting long." Above them, the storm clouds began to roll east, lightning crawling over the desert like restless spirits. The war wasn't over. It was just finally personal. They buried the dead in shallow graves, the way soldiers do when there's no priest left to speak. Caleb said nothing. His eyes stayed on the horizon, where dust haven waited under a sky bruised purple. Eli wiped the grit from his hands, his voice low. "When we get there, no more running." Caleb nodded, the kind of nod that meant blood would answer blood. As the sun fell, they mounted up, shadows long behind them. Two brothers heading into the fire together, not as the men they were, but as the reckoning they'd become. Dust Haven looked smaller than memory, like a sin that had shrunk under the weight of time but never truly died. The streets were half empty, the air thick with heat and suspicion. Eli rode slow, scanning porches, curtains, ghosts. Caleb's horse clopped behind, each hoofbeat echoing a buried heartbeat. The saloon doors creaked in the wind, and the sheriff's office stood silent at the far end, the badge above its door dulled to rust. The place smelled of old whiskey, gun oil, and unfinished business. Eli reined in his horse, staring down the street. "You ready for this?" he asked. Caleb's answer was a whisper, barely human. "Been ready my whole life." The saloon hadn't changed, just quieter, emptier. Mara stood behind the bar, glass in hand, like she'd been waiting for the storm to walk through her door. When she saw them, her face hardened, the mask of someone who'd already seen how this story ends. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. "Boone knows you're here." Caleb stepped forward, voice sharp. "Then maybe he'll save us the trouble of finding him." She slammed the bottle down hard enough to crack the counter. "You don't understand," she hissed. "Boone didn't just betray you, he buried you." The silence that followed was thick enough to drink. She told them everything. How Boone had traded Caleb to a border gang to save his own skin. How he'd forged the letters that sent Eli chasing ghosts, while his brother rotted in chains. Every word was a match struck inside Eli's chest. Caleb just stared at the floor, the rage gone quiet. Too deep to burn, now just cold. "Where is he?" Eli asked. Mara's lips trembled. Sheriff's office. Always was. She looked at Caleb then, and for a second, pity flickered across her face. I'll be waiting for you. Caleb's eyes lifted, hard and hollow. Then he won't wait long. The street outside was quiet again, the kind of quiet that falls before thunder. The brothers walked side by side, guns low, eyes forward. Dust swirled around their boots, whispering English. The wind hadn't forgotten. Boone stood on the porch of the sheriff's office, coat unbuttoned, hand resting on his holster. His face hadn't changed, just older, heavier with the weight of his own lies. You boys look like you've seen a ghost, he said. Caleb stopped halfway across the street. We have, he answered, voice steady. Yours. Then the clock tower struck once, and everything in Dust Haven held its breath. The world held still, and for a heartbeat, time forgot to breathe. Boone smiled. The kind of smile men wear when they know it's coming. I did what I had to, he said. You'd have done the same. Caleb stepped forward, eyes burning. You sold your own. Boone's hand twitched toward his gun. Eli's did too. There was no warning, no count. Just thunder and light. 3 shots, 1 scream. When the smoke cleared, Boone lay bleeding on the steps, a red badge over his heart. Eli stood frozen, gun smoking. Caleb watched, silent. The law had finally answered, and it came wearing the face of its own sin. The shot still echoed when the wind started again. Dust Haven Street lay empty, except for the 3 of them. 1 dead, 2 breathing ghosts. Eli holstered his gun with hands that didn't feel like his own. Caleb stared down at Boone's body, face unreadable. He was mine to kill, he whispered. Eli said nothing. The church bell rang somewhere far off, its sound hollow as the space between them. Caleb turned away, shoulders tight. You stole that from me too, he said. The words hung like smoke in the heat. Eli wanted to answer, but guilt doesn't speak. It just waits. Somewhere beyond town, thunder rolled, calling them both to finish what had started long before the gunfire. They buried Boone outside town, beneath the same dry mesquite where their father once prayed for rain. No words were spoken. There wasn't a prayer left that hadn't already failed them. Eli stood with his hat in his hands, staring at the grave like it might answer something. Caleb kept his distance, eyes fixed on the horizon. The silence stretched until it broke on Caleb's voice, cold, measured. You took everything from me. Now you'll watch me take it back. Eli looked up, the sun carving hard lines across his face. You think killing me brings peace? Caleb shook his head. Not peace, balance. The wind caught the loose dirt, scattering it like ashes between them. By sundown, they'd saddled up again, 2 riders bound for the canyon, neither willing to say what waited there. The air hung thick, storm clouds massing low and dark. Caleb rode ahead, silent, his face carved from stone. Eli followed, every hoofbeat hammering against his ribs. He'd thought this ride would bring them together. Now he saw the truth. It was leading them apart. Lightning tore the sky open, and the rain came. Slow, heavy, relentless. The desert bled color into gray. For the first time since he found his brother, Eli knew how this story would end. They reached the ridge where the canyon split the earth. The storm raged above, the sky alive with fire. Caleb dismounted first, boots sinking in the mud. Eli followed, rain dripping from his hat brim. You think this ends with me? Eli asked. Caleb's voice broke against the thunder. It ends where it should, Viv, with blood. He drew his pistol, the metal gleaming white in the lightning. Eli didn't move. You're my brother, he said softly. That's the problem, Caleb answered, stepping forward. The wind screamed between them, and the world waited for the first man to blink. The shot came. 1, then none. When the echo died, only rain remained. Caleb fell to his knees, gun slipping from his hand, eyes wide with disbelief. Eli stood before him, smoke curling from his revolver. "You left me," Caleb rasped. Eli knelt, catching him before he hit the mud. "I came back," he whispered. The rain washed red from Caleb's coat, turning the earth beneath them dark and silent. "It's over," Eli said, though his voice broke as he said it. Caleb's eyes flickered once, then closed. Thunder rumbled deep in the canyon, slow and endless, like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. The storm passed before dawn, leaving the canyon quiet as a church without prayer. Eli sat beside his brother's body, the rain gone, but the world still dripping with sorrow. The air smelled of wet dust and gun smoke, the scent of endings. He didn't cry. Men like him forgot how long ago. He just watched the sky lighten, pale blue creeping through torn clouds. Somewhere far off, a coyote called lonely and hollow. Eli reached out, closing Caleb's eyes with a hand that trembled once, then steadied. "You can rest now," he murmured. The wind carried the words away, soft as forgiveness. For the first time in years, there was peace in the silence. He dug the grave himself. Slow, deliberate, every shovel of dirt another memory unearthed. The ground was soft from rain, easier to cut than the past. When it was done, he laid Caleb down with the same care he'd once used to lift him as a child. He placed the broken mask atop the mound, half buried in the red earth. The sun rose higher, turning the horizon gold. "You were always the better shot," he said quietly. The desert wind sighed like an answer. He stood there a long while, the world holding its breath around him, until even the echoes seemed too tired to stay. He left the canyon with the sun at his back, the sound of hooves muffled by wet sand. Each mile felt lighter, as if the desert was letting him go. By noon, the storm clouds were gone, leaving only heat and quiet. He didn't look back. The world ahead was wide, and maybe, for once, it didn't owe him anything. The road shimmered in the distance, and beyond it, nothing but horizon. He rode slower than before, not out of fear, but out of respect for the dead. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that the trail never ends. It just changes its name. By dusk, Dust Haven came back into view. Quiet, empty, almost kind. Mara stood outside the saloon, arms crossed, watching him approach. She didn't smile. She just nodded, slow, understanding everything without needing to ask. He dismounted, the saddle creaking like an old hymn. "He's gone," Eli said. She looked past him toward the horizon. "They all are." He tipped his hat, eyes soft for the first time in years. "Then reckon it's time I joined them," he said, meaning not death, but the long road west. She didn't stop him. Some ghosts are meant to ride alone. Night came soft. The stars stretched endless above the desert, clear and sharp as glass. Eli rode west, the rhythm of his horse steady, heart heavier, but somehow whole. Behind him lay the town, the graves, the ghosts, all quiet now. Ahead waited only horizon and silence. He looked up once, the sky so wide it almost felt like forgiveness. Somewhere, the wind carried his brother's name, and for the first time it didn't hurt. Just before dawn, the trail vanished into gold, and Eli kept riding, not to escape the past, but to carry it home.